Well, good evening and welcome to this episode of the Pointbreak Roundtable. My name's Tyler Riley. This week, I am joined by Bennett Boyd and Michael Frnka, who both serve on The Road, which is our missions program here at Faith Bridge. And the topic today is if I could go back. So we are going back in time to when we were in high school. And just kind of the opening question that I kind of want to set everything up with is, if you could go back and you could give yourself any advice when you were in high school, what would that advice be?
Yeah.
Some of us have to go further back than others.
That's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
I think it might help to paint a picture of who I was as a high school student.
Yeah.
Very much on the nerdy side, orchestra, French club, all the things. Very focused on GPA, and so all the extracurriculars, being plugged in at church. And so I think the advice that I would give would be just to do less and to do those things really well, so that I have even more time to focus on my relationship with the Lord and really getting to build up that discipline. So doing less well.
Yeah.
I can kind of echo that a little bit. I was chronically overcommitted. I was always doing as many things as I possibly could. And what I ended up doing, not on purpose, but as a result of that, was filling up my time so fully that I shoved out the time for the things that were important, like my relationship with God and my family and my friends, for the sake of doing all of these things, like Bennett's talking about. I was also nerdy. I was in theater, president of my thespian troupe, so there's that. In choir and at church, I played in the band. I had all these other things going on. I was leading a Bible study. I had an accountability group, which is funny because of my heart and where I was. For example, the accountability group became more like a, let me go up here and say the right things. So everybody, I can maintain this picture of myself and how I look. And I missed the point completely, because I was so busy trying to fill this time with stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I very much was on the same. I was very concerned with how I came across to people, my appearance, not as much my physical appearance, if you go back and look at my wardrobe choices, but definitely how I was perceived by people. That was held in a very kind of high regard for me. Like I wanted to come across as this or as that or whatever. And I think it kind of caused me to really put a lot of focus in areas that weren't a part of who I was supposed to be or was going to be. And I really didn't know who I was. I mean, not until, I think honestly, we're always kind of learning who we are. But I think even more recently, like in the past several years, I've started to really dive into that. Like, hang on, like, who am I? What was I created to do? Like, what are my giftings? What are my strengths? I was really good at knowing my weaknesses. I think a lot of people are really good at knowing their weaknesses, but we're not very good at knowing what our strengths are and what our giftings are.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to put, I guess, just more focus into that and just kind of shed the act, if you will. I was also not in theater, but I was in my own movie at all times.
Oh my gosh.
At all times.
Not surprising.
At all times.
Camera never stopped.
They never, ever stops. But speaking of like advice, we were kind of talking about this just a little bit before, and you were even talking about advice that other people gave you.
Yeah.
Could you kind of elaborate
Sure.
a little bit on that?
I was involved at a church that had a really large youth group. And they did a pretty good job setting us up with people who are going to mentor us, much like FSM does. A little bit different format. We didn't follow all the way through the school career with the student, but we did have these smaller groups. So I had two men in particular in my life that made it a point from the time I was in the 7th grade through I graduated high school to invest in me. And unfortunately, I think I saw them a lot of times as, I don't really know how to phrase it, but people who meant well, but just didn't understand what life was like as a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old. And so I think one of the biggest regrets that I have is not taking what they were saying seriously, namely making spiritual discipline a center point of your daily routine. Like I mentioned earlier, I was so heavily concerned about making time for all of these social things that were going to raise the way I looked in the eyes of other people, to where I neglected where I was with the Lord. So carving out that time to be in the Word, to pray, to be in meaningful accountability groups where people had the right to speak to me and I would be open with them and not just say what I thought they wanted to hear. I think I missed a lot because I didn't take them seriously.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You were kind of talking about being involved here at FaithBridge, which is just a really cool thing, like you yourself coming through the student ministry here and then now in a position where you really are impacting, mentoring a lot of people, which is just really cool that that's all coming full circle. What about you? Like, were there people in your life who were kind of pouring into you in that stage? Is there any, is kind of putting you on the spot, is there any advice that they gave you that was kind of lasting? Just talk a little bit about that relationship.
Well, I remember, so yes, to answer your question, definitely people poured into me while I was here as a student. The two that come to mind would be Amanda O'Kelly, who still works here too. She was my mentor growing up, and I think she would just tell me to read my Bible all the time and be like, yeah. And seventh period, I would be doing what I needed to do for my discipleship after school, but not really like investing in it and not really taking it super seriously. And so I think that was one thing she told me to do that I wish I had done, was like, spend that time where I know I have time to actually give to it and focus and not listen to my teacher while I'm reading the Bible, you know? But then the other thing that sticks out is the other person is Seth Martin, who was my high school pastor at the time and then worked for The Road and now does a lot of video things too. And I just remember he was a huge voice in my life of like, your life, Bennett, does not have to look like the world tells you it needs to look. Like if you want to be a missionary, if you want to do ministry full time, you do that. Like you don't have to be this businesswoman or follow in your family's footsteps in that way. But like, you know, God created you this way and gave you these passions and desires, like follow them and be obedient to the call that he's put on your heart. And so I think those are the two people that come to mind, Amanda and Seth.
Yeah. Which along those lines, kind of going off of that, again, we were talking kind of beforehand and you were talking about something I think would be freeing for a lot of people to hear, which is a lesson that I didn't learn till later about knowing exactly what you want to do in that sort of deal. Can you elaborate a little bit on that advice that you were talking about?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in high school, I know this is probably the same for all high schoolers now, just that internal pressure of like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do? I have to have it all figured out. Like I need to have a game plan from age 18 all the way to 50 to know like what is my life going to look like. And the reality is we're not called to know that. We're called to act obediently in the steps that the Lord illuminates before us. But as far as having it all figured out, like you don't have to. And so that's what I would tell high school Bennett is like, girl, calm down. Like it's okay. Like things are going to change anyway in college. You're going to change your major. You're going to be back where you never thought you would be, working at the church that you grew up in, and it's going to be awesome. But it's not what I thought high school Bennett was going to be doing. And so it just holding loosely your plans and walking faithfully in what the Lord reveals to you at that time. Yeah,
which is a lesson that like many adults would say that they're still learning. It's like what I'm doing now is very different than what I was doing 3 years ago, and it's so fun, but also fulfilling to take one more step into, okay, I feel like this is kind of where God's leading me. You take one more step and it's infinitely more fulfilling. You're starting to understand that. And I remember my freshman year of college on a Saturday, my first week of college, on a Saturday, I was on the football team and I was a kinesiology major. And then on Monday, I was in the marching band and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was just like, I remember distinctly just that transition. I was like, I didn't even learn how to tape an ankle. I was a kinesiology major for like less than 48 hours. But I remember that was really like a pivotal point for me. I started, at that point I was pursuing a music degree and started to kind of be like, gosh, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I start taking steps and more steps. And then what I'm doing now is so infinitely different than what I had planned or thought I was supposed to be doing. And And so thanks for sharing that, because I feel like that's such a freeing lesson, especially for a high schooler. It's like, you don't need to know what career you're going into next. Like that can be a freeing thing. You can have an idea and start taking steps, but it's all about taking steps toward where you feel like the Lord is calling you and spending time in prayer. And so I would kind of, I guess, close our time a little bit with a final question. And that is for specifically our high school students who are listening or watching or however they're viewing. What action step would you give a high school student leaving this episode? What action step would you give them?
Yeah, I'd say make the time. We all have 24 hours in a day, and I know that we all have things that we have to do. But when you really we challenged our Curious group a couple of years ago now to log their days. And what we mean by that was, like, I woke up at 9:57, and from 9:57 until 10:03, I got up and used the bathroom and brushed my teeth. And then, like, minute by minute. And what we discovered was they spent a whole lot of time playing video games. Like, a lot. An amount of time that was shocking to me, right? Yeah. Playing video games. And that's kind of a generalization, but for the most part, that was the result. And we use that as a tool to say, look at this time. Like, we say that we're busy and we don't have any time, but man, for one, you started your day later than you had to, so you can carve time there. And look at all the time we spend throughout our day just being idle, doing things that don't matter. They're not necessarily bad in and of themselves, but they're things that are unnecessary that we can cut for the most necessary thing that we can possibly have, which is our relationship with Christ. So carve out that time, and it doesn't have to be an hour and a half every day of sitting alone in a dark room listening to God. I mean, it can be that. But start with 5 or 10 minutes. Like, if you're doing nothing, take baby steps, and you'll find that even that small time investment will be the most fulfilling part of your day. And then you'll start to hunger it, and it'll get a little bit longer and a little bit more meaningful and a little bit deeper. And before you know it, you'll be seeking people to, like, walk alongside of you and do these things with you and share. And all of a sudden you're in life-giving community. You're learning God's word, and you're spending time in prayer, and it becomes the most important thing in your life.
Yeah.
So make the time.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, and I think for me, the little nugget of action step that I would say would be get in a discipleship group. Like, I knew all through kids ministry and student ministry, like, I knew who Jesus was, I believed in him, but it wasn't until I entered that, like, discipleship, mentor-mentee relationship with Amanda that grace really clicked for me. And I was like, oh, this is personal. And so through that relationship, like, it all just became so real in a way that I had never experienced before. And so that would be my action step.
Yeah, which is a good word, because community is a big part of Pointbreak and what it's like a pillar of our motto, and it's what I think our students love a lot. But that community can go even deeper. And we were talking at the beginning, like, hey, I wish I would have listened to some of these mentors who were pouring into me. And so making sure, yes, you're plugged into a community, but even that community is deeper in this discipleship relationship where there are people pouring into you. I still have people who are pouring into me. That's always important. In one guy in particular, Jared Schuler, I'll get on the phone with him when I can and just, like, I have this question. Could you listen to this sermon? Could you, like, do this? And he's somebody that I respect a lot. And so that's such a good word too, and a good reminder. Hey, in whatever stage that you're in, having somebody who can mentor and disciple you is very, very key and very, very crucial. So,
and to speak to that, even I'm 33 years old, and these men that I ignored while I was in high school, I still talk to you today, like you're saying. Like, I talked to one of them this week. I can pick up the phone and call them, because that investment that they made in you when you were in high school is one that's not going to go away when you finish the 12th grade. These are people that love students and that want to be a part of their life, and won't just help you navigate high school, but will help you navigate college, getting a job, dating, getting married. Like, these are people who want to be part of your life. And so, start now. That's true.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, thank y'all both for being a part of the roundtable this week. It was really good to get to chat with y'all, and really good advice, really good wisdom from both of y'all. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for tuning in tonight. We will be back with another episode of the roundtable next Sunday night at 7 p.m. right back here. You can also listen to the podcast under the Pointbreak podcast on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you stream But until then, we will see you next Sunday night and have a great rest of your week.